Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Stefania Palma. I am the Singapore correspondent for the Financial Times. I cover the city-state as well as Indonesia and Malaysia. And joining me today for a fireside chat is Ravi Thakran, the Chairman Emeritus of L Catterton Asia, Chairman and CEO of Aspirational Consumer Lifestyle Corp, his latest SPAC, and also group chairman for South and Southeast Asia, as well as Australia and New Zealand at LVMH. Ravi, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Stefania. Great to be with you.
So first off, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your changing role at L Catterton Asia, which you've headed for a very long time and have now become Chairman Emeritus at the firm. I wanted to ask you what spurred this transition and how your role now differs at L Catterton Asia.
Yeah, so good you're asking me this. Basically, I have concluded my 20 years journey with LVMH recently, a couple of weeks ago, and also my 10-year journey with L Catterton. Basically to concentrate on my new ventures going forward, which are Asia 3.0 and the SPAC. In case of SPAC, LVMH and L Catterton remain the partner for the SPAC. Our Asia 3.0 is a venture that 10 of the partners who were with me in my whole journey for L Capital are coming out to launch this platform. And we plan to start that very soon. We also have another platform called GCC Asia Growth Fund, which is a small cap, $10 to $50 million ticket investment vehicle, focusing more on GCC, Southeast Asia, India. Whereas Asia 3.0 will focus on mid cap, more $50 to $200 million tickets, focus on Japan, Korea, China, Southeast Asia, Australia. So very clear vertical SPAC focuses on American or European brands that we can bring into Asia, provide them contextual intelligence of Asia and build them to be listed in New York. Asia 3.0 focus on developed Asia, and GCC Asia Growth Fund for small cap, focus on GCC, India, Southeast Asia.
So let's talk a little bit about Asia 3.0. So this private equity fund, the target for it in terms of size is to raise between $1 and $1.5 billion. Obviously, as you mentioned, targeting Asia's consumer industry. Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of companies, what kind of entrepreneurs are you looking for at this moment in time in the region via Asia 3.0?
So first of all, let me just very quickly define why it is Asia 3.0. In the 80s and 90s, Asia played out as 1.0. And when I talk Asia here, I'm talking emerging Asia. So China, Southeast Asia, India. Really, the opening up started from China's opening in 79, India's real opening up in 91, and everyone else in between. Asia became factory of the world. We brought 500 million people out of poverty, and we started making everything which required cheap labor. Then we entered 2000s, and last 20 years have been Asia 2.0, wherein we were not happy making just cheap goods. We wanted to make sophisticated goods, and that required higher quality manpower, globally, vertically integrated systems, global processes, but also world-class infrastructure, both technology and physical infrastructure. I think Asia has already built all of that now. Today, if you land in LaGuardia Airport, you realize the US needs infrastructure more than China needs or Southeast Asia needs. What did we achieve in this Asia 2.0? We brought 1 billion people out of poverty. We upgraded our manufacturing system. Today, we manufacture everything from iPhone to iMac to cars and aircrafts. However, we missed out on one big area, which is to build world-class brands and consumer. So far, there have been Chinese brands for China, Indian brands for India, Southeast Asian brand for Southeast Asia, but we haven't built world-class consumer brands. Asia 3.0 will be all about that. We believe in the next 2 decades, Asia will produce the same amount of growth that we did in the last 40. This is the largest economic expansion ever in the history of the world, and consumption is going to drive this GDP growth. And we, having focus on consumer, want to be a catalyst in this change, wherein Asian entrepreneurs across fashion, beauty, health, wellness, fitness, across all these spectrum, which already have become fairly developed in America and Europe, and also developed part of Asia. Emerging Asia is just coming out with all these things in a big way. Even some of the nascent things like pet food, pet services. I always used to joke that till about just a decade ago, dogs were on the menu in China. And today, China has the second largest population of pets. So single child policy and combined with urbanization has led to pets becoming companion, and completely humanization of pets like in West has happened as well. So category after category are emerging. We want to help entrepreneurs to pick up these categories and create a leadership in each of those, and then really learning all those that we learned from Western brand development, and then helping these entrepreneurs to build world-class brand. That's the real quest of Asia.
So some of the sectors that you will be focusing on via this fund obviously are, linked to lifestyle, personal wellness, experiential retail, but these are also sectors that arguably are very much dependent on discretionary spending. And right now, obviously, we're in a full-blown crisis, of which the kind of consequences and aftermath are still unclear in terms of the true effects that this is going to have when it comes to economic recessions across the world, and obviously in this region as well. So to what extent do you think COVID might impact these same sectors that you're looking to focus, and how could that in some way affect your plans for Asia 3.0?
Stefan, a very interesting situation is that this particular recession, on one hand, is much more severe than the great financial crisis. That time it was about liquidity and banks. Here is about all businesses. It's no more about lifestyle, but life itself, because health is such a huge issue across the world. So on the other hand, for various reasons, as we know, liquidity this time is not an issue. In fact, there is almost too much liquidity in the markets. There is too much liquidity in the public market, a lot of liquidity in private equity with huge dry powder. And that's why you see phenomenal uplift. So it's a very unique situation. And therefore, on one hand, certainly pandemic effect will certainly keep things depressed for another 18, 24 months. On the other hand, liquidity remains available in a big way. So I think given this scenario, on one hand, there is a depression on valuation, given the environment. On the other hand, a lot of money chasing good quality assets. So I would say for average products in the market, valuation perhaps will be subdued. However, for quality assets, the valuation will remain buoyant, simply because there will be a lot of money chasing these quality assets. So our focus always is on the number one or number two of each category, protagonists who have really done a great job. Most of these guys are not looking for capital, even in these kind of times. They're not highly leveraged. These guys are highly profitable businesses, but they would come to us not really for capital. They come to us because they are hungry for the value add, particularly when they go from product to brand journey. Most Asian entrepreneurs want to learn not how to make the product cheaper and make more gross margin, but how to sell it for a better price by becoming a brand. And this is where branding, presentation, packaging, storytelling, narrative building, influential strategy, social media strategy, these are the kind of elements we could bring to them, and therefore get much better valuation than otherwise would be available to a pure financial investor.
And when it comes to the size of the fund, so you, as you mentioned, you are targeting to raise between $1 and $1.5 billion. I mean, could you give us a sense of what the timelines are looking like? When do you expect to actually hit the first sort of final close?
So we're looking to do a first close in Q1 and looking to do the final close by ideally Q2 itself, or maximum Q3 next year. However, we'll start investing already from Q1 because we would have a lot of anchors already with us, and we anyway have a very good pipeline of assets in the market across all these categories that I mentioned. We already have some fantastic assets we are chasing. But so overall timing wise, yep, I wanted to put SPAC raising behind me, which is done. We are now a separate team is focused on finding assets for SPAC. Similarly, wanted to put the GCC Asia fundraising behind, which we plan to complete by year end. And then next year, real focus in the first half will be building Asia 3.0.
And in terms of concluding the actual fundraising for Asia 3.0, do we have a sort of a clearer idea of when that could finally truly be completed?
As I said, by end of Q2 ideally, or max end of Q3 next year.
Perfect. In terms of the, I guess, vision behind this new fund is also the idea that Asia really does have, according to you, the possibility to create multiple and dozens of $1 billion companies, the same kinds of companies that arguably you helped also grow and that you invested in during your time at L Catterton. I mean, do you have specific markets in mind where you think that could happen the quickest? And what kind of time frame are we looking at for Asia to reach that kind of target?
Well, look, a very obvious market is China, because China is providing half of the GDP growth of the Asian region. China has a critical mass, and therefore a lot of brands would emerge in the Chinese market, which potentially now could not only be good for China, but could start going regional first and then global. Secondly, there are very good sparks coming from Japan and Korea, which have already been good on innovation and creativity, but not very good on storytelling. So Japan, category after category, you will see phenomenal brand. ASICS in sports, Royce in chocolate and confectionaries, and Seiko in watches. Great brand. The product quality is as good as any Western brand. However, the marketing sucks. And then they've always been very shy on one hand, and on the other hand, not really astute. And I think we could really provide that help to brands in beauty. Today, organic beauty is becoming a key play, and traceability of ingredients becoming a big play. Provenance and heritage of a market with good reputation is important, and therefore Japan, Korea kind of markets could be a huge play in that. In all of these, the key element will be while we make some superlative products with great provenance and heritage, we need to learn from the West on how to tell the story better, how to create this emotional bond and intimacy with the customers. That intangible value creation, the branding piece, is extremely important, which we have been weak at. So that's the second vertical. Also, I see market like Australia and New Zealand, which have been very famous for high quality food, alternative food solution like plant-based protein, milk alternatives, etc. So it has both, on one hand, very high quality food and wine. On the other hand, plant-based protein, other alternatives coming up as well from that. It also is a market which has been into fitness as much as United States, if not more. And again, a lot of brands like F45 and many others have come out from that market. We believe Australia will continue to generate a lot of these innovative ideas. We need to pick up those and see how we can build a bridge for Australia with the mainstream Asia. Of course, as of now, there are some headwinds in the relationship between Australia and China, and hope they get over that. But there is so much more to Asia than just China. And Australia typically is always looked at, whenever I've looked at Australian business, the entrepreneur always said they're looking to go to UK first, then United States second. So either they are Commonwealth oriented or US oriented. They've never been so much Asia oriented, but for mining products or raw materials or wines, etc. But I think branded products from that market can certainly find a great market in Asia. So we're looking at all these. China is the mainstream arena, which will be 40-50% of source of our investment. Japan, Korea, and then Australia, all three verticals will be strong part. Southeast Asia, while individually each country do not have scale, but collectively, I think Southeast Asia is a phenomenal market. So we used to say in LVMH that, hey, if you put SEA together, it'll automatically be in the top 5 markets of the world. And we need to start looking at it as a block and start investing in it. That I see a lot of sparks in high growth market like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. There are some unique categories emerging like halal cosmetics, a business out of Indonesia. There are 2 very good brands in that market. All of these things are at early stages. And if we can pick them up at this stage and build them into next $1 billion plus brands, I am very sure we will complete our quest of building $25 billion brands in next decade.
Ravi, and I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about the SPAC that you were involved in earlier this year. So essentially, you joined, the latest hot Wall Street trend by raising $225 million by a SPAC listing in New York. And if so far we spoke about sort of Asia-based consumer-focused companies being sort of grown from obviously within these markets, the SPAC actually looks potentially at investing and or targeting a European or potentially an American brand looking to expand in Asia. So the other way around in some sense. I wanted to ask you, why did you opt for this type of vehicle at this moment in time? Why did it make sense?
Two reasons. So one, Asia in the last decade provided 62% of GDP growth to the world. I believe in the next decade it'll be same or more. Given the fact that Asian economies have come out of the recovery phase much faster than West. West is still struggling to deal with pandemic. And I think overall, China is already back in growth and other Asian economies are going to come back in growth. But the fact is, over the next decade, if 60% of GDP growth is coming from Asia, if consumption is growing at 3 times the speed of West, obviously the Western brands, be American or European, will have to look at how to gain access to this market. Now, Asia is not a monolith. In fact, Asian markets are very complex. Markets like Japan, Korea, China, Indonesia, India, Saudi Arabia, they're hard to penetrate. And brand after brand from the West over decades have tried, and few have succeeded and many have not. And so we, having worked with, and me and my team have had the pleasure of working with companies like Apple, Google, LVMH, Nike, Zara, etc. We have done it over the last 35, 40 years, so many times. But the key element of all of that was understanding the contextual intelligence of each market and its nuances, and then adapting and adopting to that market and creating success. For example, my colleague Mark Bedingham, who led Moët Hennessy, he started working on Hennessy when Hennessy was considered a cheap drink for taxi drivers in Hong Kong. And now it is by far the #1 brand in spirits in China. Similarly, Japanese didn't drink champagne. And now Japan is a leading market for champagne in the world. They focus on a niche of 25 to 45-year-old women and stayed focused on that and build that. Now, these kind of nuggets and nuances that we can bring to brand is the reason of success. So now, why it links to SPAC, we believe that there are very good brands in America, particularly in the categories I mentioned about health, wellness, plant-based, protein, milk alternatives, etc., which have gained great traction, but they do not have a real bridge to Asia. We can help to build that bridge. Secondly, in SPAC's world, Stefania, you would have seen 90% of SPACs have been raised by financial investors. Only 10% of the SPACs have been raised by people with strong operating knowledge. I genuinely believe when dust settles down after some time and a lot of study has been done on SPACs, you will see clearly that SPACs led by operating managers and SPACs where people had an X factor of either a market contextual intelligence or deep knowledge of how to build brands would stand out. And I think we therefore are rightly placed to exploit this particular segment in a good way.
Could you give us, Ravi, a little bit more detail in terms of the type of time frame in identifying the kind of target that you are looking for, which, as you mentioned, we're talking about premium brands and sort of aspirational lifestyle kind of realm?
Look, in terms of, so we are already at a fairly advanced level of discussion with half a dozen brands from US and about a couple of brands from Europe. And I genuinely believe in the first half, we should be able to bring an asset to the market, which, we have 24 months, but we believe within next 6 to 8 months, we should be able to bring an asset to market. We have some very, very good and famous brands. I have given non-disclosure, I can't share with you, but I'm broadly defining the category. Again, wellness is a big category. Sustainable consumption is another huge category, which comprises of all these things like plant-based protein, etc. But also spirits, a very unique category where we have very in-depth knowledge. All of these are looking very good. So I genuinely believe before the middle of next year, we should be able to bring an asset to the market.
Perfect. I wanted to ask you a little bit about more broadly the kinds of sort of analyses that are being done on the SPAC market this year, given the absolute boom that we've seen, especially obviously in the US. So one of the points that analysts often point to is the fact that these vehicles in some sense have a bit of a flawed incentive mechanism, in the sense that, for example, sponsors of SPACs tend to or stand to potentially benefit irrespective of the performance of the company that they end up taking public, and that therefore it doesn't create sort of a necessarily I guess an equitable or in some sense even sort of sustainable financial vehicle. And recently, actually, Bill Ackman in the FT has called SPACs one of the greatest gigs ever for the sponsor. I mean, to what extent, as a sponsor yourself, do you agree with Bill Ackman? And do you think that this is a big risk for actually, both the reputation of SPACs and the sustainability of this kind of vehicle?
Stefania, I read the article that you co-wrote, and amount of excitement it generated within the industry and from outside. And again, Bill and Chamath have been speaking a lot on the subject. But let me say two things about it. One, technically, you're right that potentially that could happen, that sponsors list the vehicle and after that take the promote and walk. But I genuinely believe the guys who would be standing tall in the market will be the one who are not looking at short term, but they're looking at clear mid to long term, that we bring an asset to the market, which we are going to stay on with. We invest further than just our original risk capital and basically help grow it. I would say to you very clearly, we will not invest in an asset where there is only short-term interest involved. We are looking at assets, for example, that are doing already very well in America, but haven't really penetrated Asia well or haven't penetrated at all. And we want to stay with them for next 5-10 years to help them build and really get a sustainable growth in place. So eventually, when, again, as I said, the dust settles down, on one hand, you have the strength of operating guys, and guys with contextual intelligence market will be the winners, but also the guys who stay on with the asset and build them, because it's all about your reputation of what you did last time. So you could do it once, you could do it twice, but you can't continue to do it. If you want to continue to play in the SPAC vertical, I genuinely hope the sponsors will really take the mid to long-term look.
I guess another point of potential risk within sort of how SPACs are structured is obviously the deadlines that they face in terms of finding a target and taking it public. So it tends to be up to sort of 24 months. And essentially another potential risk is the fact that as you get closer to that deadline, basically the quality of the targets and the quality of potentially of the decision of the target you end up picking might essentially drop, therefore sort of spurring a flurry of sort of reverse listings that actually end up, again, making the market unsustainable. I mean, to what degree are you worried about this as someone obviously involved in the sector, as a number of analysts are calling these SPAC listings a bubble essentially for 2020?
Well, again, this year in particular, the activity has been very robust and a lot of SPACs have been raised. At the same time, you already see a lot of SPACs are already in the last 6 months, 8 months. And in fact, there's a retrade market opening up. Some people are ready to discuss selling their present SPAC to somebody who will take on the risk capital and has assets. So it is very clear. I think if people wanting to just ride the bandwagon because it is hot today, I would strongly advise not to, because your risk capital could really become the risk and there'll be no capital left. Because if you have a clear differentiation, if you have a clear value add and a creative play at hand, obviously get on the bandwagon. But if you're just saying, hey, this is hot and why not we just dive in and can make, I don't think that would be so easy. So you're so right, the 24 months is not necessarily 24, but the moment you cross 12 or 14 months, the pressure starts to rise. And mind you, it's not only the quality of asset. The reason is the seller knows that you have very limited time left. the valuation discussion starts to get tougher, the bargaining power changes. So I genuinely believe the people who have a deep knowledge of sector they want to invest in, people who can bring the true value add, people who have great skill set and can bring more talent to the platform should stay onto this bandwagon. The others really should stay out.
Perfect. And speaking obviously of this strong trend for SPACs, we talked about sort of valuations earlier on, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the combination of, private equity and dry powder in private equity at all-time highs, combined with obviously the increasing number of SPAC listings. I mean, are you afraid of valuations essentially just getting pushed up in a way that truly does not make sense for the market?
You're so right. I think there's two very contrarian things emerging. On one hand, as I mentioned earlier, it should be obvious that when you have a pandemic and all the headwinds in front, typically valuations become a little more reasonable. And that has been the historical context to great financial crisis, led to 2 years of great vintage. People who invested post that were able to then harvest much better thereafter. But this time, as I mentioned earlier, the big issue is on one hand, yes, there is a headwind, and particularly some categories are facing huge headwinds. But on the other hand, liquidity is just so enormous. And as a result, I would say that good quality asset will still be able to command good valuation. We already see things are very buoyant. Companies that are in high growth mode, companies that are in the right categories, which are driving the mega themes of wellness, fitness, etc. I think good class company will still get phenomenal valuations there. And then, of course, one has to be careful not to be chasing superfluous targets who are, because I genuinely believe next 18 to 24 months, we'll still see deflationary pressures. And yes, I do believe that 7, 8 years after that will be great growth. I do hope that vaccine and all these things will get distributed fast enough and we'll all be back to recovery. And but I think we should read Martin Wolf enough and others and know that these things do have tendency to stay with the deflationary pressure. So we absolutely have to be careful in this.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about Asia-backed SPACs. So proceeds from these kinds of vehicles have actually increased and surged threefold from 2019 to this year up as of October, but they still account for a very, very small percentage of the SPACs listed in the US. And I was wondering if, in your opinion, we will see this percentage increase, or if this is still going to be sort of a sporadic deals here and there of specific sponsors like yourself that see value in these kinds of vehicles.
I think it's a very interesting thing, and I myself, I'm a student in this as of now and learning so much about it. But I would say Asia, on one hand, the mature market like Japan have big liquidity in their own market. China itself is fairly robust capital market. So very few companies that have looked at New York, both NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, are typically technology companies because technology is hot across all markets and particularly hot in Americas. And technology that enables people to connect to this large Asian consumer base particularly becomes doubly hot. So I would say those kind of companies, and then a company like SEA from Singapore or Razer and all these kind of companies certainly would be good candidates or have been good candidates already. But in terms of pure consumption play, what happens when you take a business for listing in New York, you would want the investing community to know the business, know the category, they can relate to it. And on that front, unless we have concepts in Asia which already are resonating well outside, it will be difficult to do. So I'll give you an example. Din Tai Fung is a phenomenal F&B concept, very high margin, I'm sure. Yeah, something like that. If you list in Hong Kong or anywhere, obviously it'll be superstar because everybody knows what it's about. Taking it to New York, I think the people in West Coast know it because they're in some of the market like LA. but they don't know it fully well. Could it be as successful? It may even be perceived as a Chinese business, though it is from Taiwan. Uh, uh, I think the relatability to the asset from the investor community is an important variable as well. Looking at that today, they're able to relate fairly well to technology-led companies, but in the consumption play, not so much so far. But I genuinely hope that going forward, we can take our respectful share in this by taking good quality assets to market. Now, I'll give you another example, and this is, I'm not giving any cue here at all. I'm just saying a brand like Gentle Monster from Korea, which is already creating wave, is absolutely best in class eyewear business. Or similarly, Charles & Keith from Singapore, which is already $1 billion+ business in Asia itself, and is the best high value, low price model in the category of fashion, a category that is having so much headwind and everybody's writing off the category. There are players from Asia which can go and outcompete Aldo and Zara and everyone on that. Now, these should be good candidates. But again, it would need good storytelling to the investing community first on what they are about. I would be very happy to champion some of these kind of causes going forward and hopefully take Asian assets to SPAC market as well.
I wanted to talk to you also, Ravi, a little bit about in addition to all of these projects that you're obviously involved in, what else is sort of in the works for you going forward? And I do know that, for instance, this year, you joined the new Canadian PE firm, Venn Growth Partners, in an advisory role. And could you tell us a little bit about what kind of role you will play there and why you thought that makes sense for you at this moment in time?
Well, I've been involved in 2 projects. So one, and obviously Venn Growth, I've known John McCarthy and Chris Reynolds, who are dear friends. They were starting a platform focus on consumer businesses in North America, Canada, and United States. In fact, their focus is not also entire US, is Canada, California, Texas, Florida. And key aim is to pick up businesses from there and provide them a great bridge to Asia. And hence, somebody like me could be useful in the journey, and therefore I provided them with some seed capital and also my advice on how to build that connect. So that's one, but I'm really not spending much time on it. It's more advisory role for them. Secondly, there is a venture fund in Latin America called Latin Leap, which basically connects actually Southeast Asia with Latin America. That is the declared theme. And again, we provided some seed capital and helping them. Stefan, who's running that fund, is a fantastic guy. He built one of the most successful e-commerce business in Latin America, and he's leading that. So I'm involved in some of those. But again, in all of these, the benefit to me is picking up on innovation and creativity from these markets, and then learning from them and see how we in Asia could learn from that. In return, we can provide them some contextual intelligence about Asia they can benefit from. So it's a great quid pro quo for us.
And we're nearing the end of the session, but in terms of, again, looking at the projects that you're involved in at the moment, could you share any details, for example, on the partners that joined you from L Catterton in your new ventures?
So, well, look, I'm very blessed to have now a great set of colleagues from LVMH as well as L Catterton joining me. So Mark Bedingham led Moët Hennessy for 20 years, and he really was known as King Mark in the world of spirits. He also led the whole joint venture with Diageo, our distribution companies in China and Southeast Asia are called MSD, Moët Hennessy Diageo. Phenomenal person with great knowledge of that particular category, but not only spirits, also a great guy when it comes to providing contextual intelligence, strategy on how to win in China, how to win in Japan, speaks fluent Japanese. I'm very grateful to have people like that. Similarly, Afif Fadar, who built Sephora in Asia, he's part of my team. From L Catterton side, Narayan Ramachandran, who was the chief investment officer, Shriram, who was the consumer tech investor. All these people are joining my team. On the other hand, I've also added some new people. So I have a young lady who was head of Apple in China. She's joining me. A gentleman who's been at Google in Consumer Products Group. So we have got a very good set of team, good mix of LVMH talent, L Catterton talent, and also now new talent. particularly in the area of consumer technology, because we are pivoting where customer is pivoting. Customer is post-COVID will get even more involved in digital world. Hence, we need to get involved in that, and therefore we needed that extra talent.
Ravi, we're nearing the end of the session, but to finish up, I wanted to ask you a bit more of a sort of a big picture question when thinking about Asia, and obviously as someone who's targeting the consumer industry in the region. I mean, what kind of recovery do you see unfolding in the region in the wake, obviously, of the coronavirus pandemic, and also in the context of one of the biggest political events of the year, obviously with US elections and Biden's victory. What kind of essentially expectations do you have for Asia in the next few months?
Well, two very big questions. And Stefania, we could talk for next 45 minutes on just these two. But just very quickly, I am very hopeful about Asia going forward. Basically, we have seen China already coming back to growth. Other Asian economies, whether it's Japan or Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, again, a good thing about whether we can criticize the political system in one or the other, but generally people do listen, people do follow, people do put masks, and all of those basics alone clearly are now seen as differentiator why Asia is coming back faster towards recovery. So I generally believe in the next 1 or 2 quarters, rest of Asian market will start to generate growth once again. Hopefully, they will also figure out bubble travel with each other and start, opening up businesses, business travel, tourism. So I'm very hopeful about that. I'm not so hopeful about Western markets as yet. I think it may take slightly longer because as of now, they have still not figured out whether they should have a mask mandate or not. They still keep debating on the basics, for which there is a clear proof that you could save hundreds of thousands of lives if you clear on that. So that's one aspect. So I think overall, short term, I would say 2021 could potentially look like 2019 for bulk of Asian markets. It will not be the case for West. The best case scenario for US and Europe is 2022, looking once again like 2019. There'll be 2 lost years instead of 1 in Asia. That's one. The US election, of course, has been such a seminal event for all of us. Even though I'm not American, I feel I have a stake in that election, and therefore, and so have all other citizens of the world because of the sheer importance of that office. I hope the rhetoric that played out thus far between US and China, at least the language is better. I think the 2 big economies will certainly fight for dominance over not only the next decade, but next 2 decades. I think the world is clearly moving toward G2 and the rest. I don't think the G8 and the rest is that relevant. These 2 big economies will jostle for supremacy. America will find it difficult to give up 75, 80 years of supremacy in all global institutions, whether it's United Nations or World Bank or IMF, and everything was built post-war, primarily by American influence. And now another economy comes and challenges that whole structure. Of course, that will lead to some level of friction, but I sincerely hope it remains civil. It is more about trade and the trade dynamic and not spilling over into arenas where peace could be spoiled, because that will not be good for anyone, us in Asia or the West. But I'm really hopeful about Biden. I think he's come out with all good statements thus far. I hope he's able to get into the office soon enough and then get on with work. I think US has to take its rightful place on the table, which has for so long. Unfortunately, in the last 4 years, I used to define US as the least imperfect country in the world. I would say Singapore perhaps has now gone 1 notch above US on that front. But US has to come back to lead the world. And I'm really hopeful Biden would do that.
Well, Ravi, thank you so much. I think this hopeful note is the best way to end the session. Thank you so much for joining us, and good luck with all your new ventures. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefania. Great talking to you.